The autumn morning mist clung to the Rocky Mountains like smoke from a dying campfire, as Catherine Sullivan wiped the grease from her hands and stepped back to admire her work. The massive steam locomotive before her gleamed in the early dawn light, its brass fittings polished to mirror brightness, and its engine purring with the mechanical precision that had become her trademark. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To the casual observer, Kate was simply another assistant mechanic at the Copper Ridge rail yard, her worn overalls and oil-stained apron marking her as one of the many workers who kept the Colorado Mountain Railway running. What they didn't see was how her eyes calculated steam pressure with the accuracy of an artillery officer, or how her hands positioned tools with the deadly precision of someone who had once defused explosives under enemy fire. At 28, Kate had already spent 3 years proving herself in a world that insisted women belonged anywhere but under the hood of a locomotive. Her fellow workers had grown accustomed to her quiet competence, though none suspected that the woman who could rebuild an engine from memory had once planned demolitions that turned the tide of Civil War battles. The war had ended nearly 2 decades ago, but its lessons lived on in the careful way she approached every mechanical challenge, the strategic thinking she applied to even routine repairs, and the leadership instincts she kept carefully hidden beneath a facade of humble diligence. But today was different. Today Kate would take the first step toward her impossible dream of becoming the first certified female train engineer in Colorado, perhaps in the entire Western Territories. The certification test waited just weeks away, and every sunrise brought her closer to either triumph or devastating failure. The whistle of the morning freight train echoed across Copper Ridge as Kate Sullivan made her way through the rail yard, her practiced eye automatically assessing the condition of each locomotive they passed. The October air carried the familiar sense of coal smoke, hot metal, and the mountain pines that surrounded their high-altitude town, a combination that had become as comfortable as a mother's embrace during her 3 years working for the Colorado Mountain Railway Company. Copper Ridge sat nestled in a valley where 3 major rail lines converged, making it one of the most strategically important transportation hubs in the Colorado Rockies. The town had grown rapidly around the railroad's needs, its population swelling to nearly 2,000 souls who depended on the steady flow of freight trains carrying copper ore from the local mines, supplies to remote settlements, and passengers brave enough to tackle the treacherous mountain passes by rail. The work was dangerous, demanding, and absolutely essential to keeping the frontier territories connected to the civilized world. Kate had arrived in Copper Ridge with nothing more than a letter of introduction from a Union Army colonel who owed her more than he could ever repay, and a determination to build a life far from the battlefields that had shaped her youth. Colonel Harrison had been succinct in his recommendation to the railroad company. "Miss Sullivan possesses mechanical aptitude and steady nerves under pressure. I recommend her without reservation." What he hadn't mentioned was that those steady nerves had been forged while defusing Confederate explosives, or that her mechanical aptitude had been honed creating demolition charges that could drop bridges with surgical precision. The assistant mechanic position had been a compromise, a foot in the door of an industry that viewed women as unsuitable for anything more challenging than serving coffee to the real workers. Kate had accepted the limitations with outward grace while privately planning her assault on the male-dominated world of locomotive engineering. Every day brought new opportunities to prove her competence, to demonstrate that her gender had nothing to do with her ability to understand the complex mechanical systems that powered the railroad's operations. Her immediate supervisor, a gruff but fundamentally fair man named William Harrison, had initially viewed her arrival with the sort of skeptical resignation that marked most of his interactions with company policy. Bill had spent 30 years working his way up from track layer to senior engineer, and his weathered face told the story of countless miles spent coaxing temperamental locomotives through mountain passes that would terrify most men. He had expected Kate to wash out within a month, unable to handle the physical demands and technical challenges of railroad work. Instead, he had watched her tackle every assignment with methodical determination, her small hands proving surprisingly capable of handling heavy tools and delicate adjustments with equal skill. She never complained about the long hours or dangerous conditions, never asked for special treatment because of her gender, and displayed an intuitive understanding of locomotive mechanics that impressed even the most experienced workers. Over time, Bill's skepticism had evolved into grudging respect, though he still harbored doubts about whether any woman could handle the ultimate responsibility of engineering a train through the treacherous mountain terrain. Kate's living arrangements reflected both her practical nature and her outsider status in the male-dominated railroad community. She rented a small room at Margaret O'Brien's boarding house, a 3-story wooden structure that provided clean, affordable accommodation to the railroad workers who couldn't afford to bring their families to the frontier. Maggie O'Brien, a sharp-tongued Irish immigrant in her 50s, had initially been reluctant to rent to a woman, concerned about the potential for trouble among her predominantly male clientele. Those concerns had proved groundless as Kate established herself as a quiet, respectful tenant, who paid her rent promptly and caused no disturbances. Her room was spartanly furnished but meticulously organized, containing little beyond the necessities of frontier living and a small collection of technical manuals that she studied by lamplight each evening. What Maggie didn't know was that hidden beneath a loose floorboard were documents and tools that spoke to a very different kind of expertise, remnants of a past life that Kate hoped never to need again. The other railroad workers had eventually accepted her presence with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Some, like the young telegraph operator Jimmy Fletcher, treated her with the eager friendliness of someone genuinely excited to meet a pioneer. Jimmy, barely 16 and filled with the boundless optimism of youth, had appointed himself as Kate's unofficial guide to Copper Ridge's social dynamics, keeping her informed about everything from which shops offered the best prices to which railroad officials might be sympathetic to her engineering ambitions. Others, like Chester Polk, the traditional railroad foreman, made no secret of their belief that women had no place in railroad work beyond perhaps serving meals to the crews. Polk's opposition was rooted in a combination of genuine concern for Kate's safety and deeply held beliefs about proper gender roles, making him a frustrating opponent who couldn't simply be dismissed as malicious. His resistance to Kate's advancement came wrapped in paternalistic concern that made direct confrontation both difficult and potentially counterproductive. Dr. Henry Whitman occupied a unique position in Kate's new life, serving as both the railroad company's consulting physician and one of the few people in Copper Ridge who seemed to recognize something familiar in her bearing. A former battlefield surgeon himself, Dr. Whitman had developed sharp instincts for identifying others who had experienced the particular type of pressure that only combat could provide. He never pressed Kate for details about her past, but his knowing looks suggested that he understood she was far more than she appeared. The town
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
town's progressive voices found their strongest representation in Ruth Chambers, the local school teacher and an outspoken advocate for women's rights. Ruth had immediately embraced Kate as a symbol of changing times, organizing informal support groups among the town's women, and using her position to challenge traditional assumptions about female capabilities. Her support provided Kate with valuable social allies, though it also served to paint a larger target on her ambitions by associating them with broader questions about women's place in frontier society. The railroad company itself remained deeply divided about Kate's presence and aspirations. Frank Murphy, the local superintendent, found himself caught between progressive company policies aimed at attracting skilled workers regardless of gender and practical concerns about the reactions of both his workforce and the communities they served. Murphy was fundamentally a pragmatic man who cared more about keeping trains running on schedule than about social conventions, but he also understood that controversy could disrupt operations in ways that went far beyond any individual employee's performance. The broader context of Kate's ambitions was shaped by the rapid changes transforming the American West in the 1880s. The railroad network was expanding at an unprecedented pace, connecting previously isolated communities and creating new economic opportunities, while also bringing new forms of conflict and criminal activity. Outlaw gangs had discovered that trains made excellent targets, carrying everything from mining payrolls to valuable cargo through remote areas where law enforcement was scarce and escape routes were plentiful. The Colorado Mountain Railway had already suffered several attacks, losing thousands of dollars in stolen freight, and facing increasing pressure from both investors and local communities to improve security. The company's response had been to hire additional guards and implement new safety protocols, but the fundamental vulnerability of long supply lines through mountainous terrain remained unchanged. Every train that left Copper Ridge carried the risk of encountering hostile forces, making the job of locomotive engineer one of the most dangerous positions in an already hazardous industry. Kate's awareness of these dangers was informed by perspectives that her colleagues couldn't imagine. Her military experience had taught her to think tactically about terrain, supply lines, and the psychology of attackers, giving her insights into railroad security that went far beyond the conventional wisdom of civilian workers. She had studied the reports of previous attacks with the analytical eye of someone trained in military intelligence, identifying patterns and vulnerabilities that others missed. But knowledge was useless without opportunity, and opportunity in the railroad industry remained frustratingly limited for women. The path to locomotive engineer certification required extensive documented experience in increasingly responsible positions, from assistant mechanic to full mechanic, to fireman, to engineer trainee. Each step demanded not only technical competence, but also the confidence of supervisors who held the power to recommend advancement or deny it entirely. Kate's strategy for overcoming these barriers combined exceptional performance with careful relationship building, demonstrating her capabilities while avoiding the kind of confrontational behavior that might provide excuses for discrimination. She volunteered for the most difficult assignments, worked longer hours than her male colleagues, and consistently delivered results that exceeded expectations. Her approach was methodical and patient, designed to build an overwhelming case for her advancement that would be difficult for even the most biased supervisor to dismiss. The technical challenges of locomotive engineering in mountainous terrain provided Kate with opportunities to showcase skills that set her apart from other candidates. The Colorado Rockies demanded engineers who could navigate steep grades, sharp curves, and rapidly changing weather conditions, while managing the complex mechanical systems that powered their trains. A single miscalculation could result in derailment, explosion, or collision, making the position one that required both technical expertise and steady nerves under extreme pressure. Kate's background had prepared her for exactly these types of high-stakes decisions, though she couldn't reveal the source of her experience without raising questions about her past that she preferred to keep buried. Instead, she demonstrated her capabilities through practical performance, volunteering for maintenance runs on the most challenging mountain routes, and consistently bringing her locomotives home safely regardless of the conditions they encountered. The social dynamics of Copper Ridge reflected the broader tensions of a society grappling with changing roles for women. The town's residents included progressive voices, who saw Kate's ambitions as part of inevitable social evolution, and conservative elements, who viewed any departure from traditional gender roles as a threat to social stability. These divisions played out in everything from casual conversations at the general store to formal discussions at town council meetings, creating a complex environment where Kate's success or failure would be interpreted as validation for competing worldviews. The approaching certification test represented more than just a personal milestone for Kate. It had become a symbol of broader questions about women's capabilities and society's willingness to judge people based on merit rather than gender. The railroad company had agreed to allow her to attempt certification partly as a response to progressive pressure, and partly because her demonstrated competence made denial difficult to justify. The test itself would be conducted under the same standards applied to male candidates, with no accommodations made for her gender. Kate's preparation for the certification had been exhaustive, combining intensive study of technical manuals with practical experience gained through every available opportunity. She had memorized the operating characteristics of every locomotive in the Colorado Mountain Railway's fleet, studied the topographical challenges of each major route, and developed contingency plans for the various emergency situations that might arise during the examination. Her approach reflected both natural intelligence and disciplined preparation, qualities that had served her well during her previous career, but took on new meaning in the context of railroad operations. The stakes of the certification test extended far beyond Kate's personal ambitions. Success would open doors not just for her but potentially for other women seeking non-traditional careers in the rapidly industrializing American economy. Failure would provide ammunition for those who argued that certain positions were inherently unsuitable for women, potentially setting back progress for years to come. The weight of these broader implications added pressure to an already challenging undertaking, requiring Kate to perform at her absolute best while managing expectations and scrutiny that her male counterparts never faced. The technical aspects of locomotive engineering that Kate had mastered included understanding steam pressure systems, mechanical linkages, braking systems, and the complex interactions between these components under various operating conditions. Mountain railroading added additional layers of complexity involving gradient management, weather adaptation, and the specialized techniques required to safely navigate the treacherous passes that connected Colorado's mining communities with the outside world. These skills could only be developed through extensive hands-on experience, making Kate's 3 years of methodical preparation essential to her certification hopes. But beyond the technical knowledge and practical skills lay an element that couldn't be taught or practiced: the leadership presence required to command respect from train crews and make life-or-death decisions under extreme pressure. This was perhaps the area where Kate's hidden background provided the greatest advantage, though it was also the aspect of her qualifications that she could least afford to reveal. Her military experience had taught her to project calm confidence even in chaotic situations, to make rapid decisions with incomplete information, and to inspire others to perform beyond their perceived limitations. As Kate completed her morning inspection routine and prepared to begin another day of proving herself worthy of advancement, she carried with her the accumulated weight of 3 years' worth of careful planning, relentless preparation, and unwavering determination. The certification test waited just weeks away, representing either the fulfillment of an impossible dream or the crushing end of ambitions that had sustained her through every challenge she had faced since arriving in Copper Ridge. The mountain morning stretched before her, filled with the familiar rhythms of railroad work but charged with the electric anticipation of approaching transformation. In just a few hours, the regular freight operations would begin, bringing new opportunities to demonstrate her competence and new challenges to overcome. Each day brought her closer to the moment when she would either make history as Colorado's first certified female locomotive engineer, or join the ranks of those who had dared to dream beyond society's expectations, only to discover that some barriers remained impermeable to individual determination and skill. The morning sun climbed higher over Copper Ridge as Kate made her way to the boarding house dining room for breakfast, her mind already focused on the day's challenges ahead. The familiar sounds of a frontier town awakening filled the air through the open windows: the clip-clop of horses on the main street, the distant hammering from the blacksmith's shop, and the ever-present whistle of trains moving through the rail yard. Margaret O'Brien's boarding house had become more than just a place to sleep during Kate's 3 years in Copper Ridge. It had become the closest thing to home she had known since the war ended. The dining room buzzed with quiet conversation as railroad workers, mine supervisors, and traveling merchants gathered around the long wooden tables for Maggie's hearty breakfast fare. Kate had earned her place among these men through consistent performance and unwavering professionalism, though she remained acutely aware that acceptance was fragile and could be withdrawn at any moment. The conversations that swirled around her revealed the complex social dynamics of a community built around dangerous, demanding work where trust and competence mattered more than social conventions, yet where those same conventions still held considerable power. Frank Murphy, the railroad superintendent, sat at his usual table near the window, methodically working through a stack of dispatches while consuming his eggs and coffee. Kate had developed a professional relationship with Murphy built on mutual respect for competence and reliability, though she understood that his support for her engineering ambitions remained cautious and conditional. Murphy represented the progressive element within railroad management, willing to judge workers by their results rather than their gender, but also acutely aware of the practical and political challenges that female advancement might create. The conversation at Murphy's table centered on the increasing security concerns that plagued all mountain railroad operations. Reports had been filtering in from other rail lines about sophisticated attacks that went beyond simple robbery, suggesting organized groups with inside knowledge of railroad procedures and schedules. These weren't desperate men making opportunistic strikes. They were well-planned operations that demonstrated understanding of both railroad operations and the tactical challenges of mountain warfare. Kate listened to these discussions with the trained ear of someone who understood military strategy, though she was careful to offer only the kind of practical observations that any experienced railroad worker might make. Her suggestions about improved communication protocols and defensive positioning were framed in terms of operational efficiency, rather than tactical superiority, disguising her deeper understanding of the strategic principles involved. The delicate balance between demonstrating competence and revealing too much knowledge had become second nature during her years in Copper Ridge. Henry Whitman occupied his customary chair at a smaller table, reading the latest medical journals that arrived with the mail train while finishing his morning meal. The doctor's presence in the boarding house dining room reflected both his bachelor status and his genuine enjoyment of the diverse conversations that emerged when men from different backgrounds gathered in informal settings. His interactions with Kate carried an undercurrent of recognition that both found comfortable and slightly dangerous, the acknowledgement between veterans who understood each other's experiences without needing explicit confirmation. The doctor had become something of an unofficial advisor to Kate during her time in Copper Ridge, offering insights into the town's social dynamics and political undercurrents that proved invaluable for navigating her unusual position. His medical practice brought him into contact with every level of local society, from mine owners to track laborers, giving him perspectives on community attitudes that few others possessed. More importantly, his own experience with the challenges of maintaining professional competence under extreme pressure had taught him to recognize similar qualities in others. Young Jimmy Fletcher bounded into the dining room with the enthusiasm that marked everything he did, clutching a handful of telegraph messages that had arrived during the night shift. The boy's energy and optimism provided a counterpoint to the more serious concerns that dominated most adult conversations in Copper Ridge, though his position as telegraph operator also gave him access to information that belied his youthful appearance. Jimmy had become one of Kate's strongest supporters, viewing her ambitions through the lens of someone too young to be fully constrained by traditional assumptions about gender roles. The telegraph messages that Jimmy carried revealed the broader context within which Kate's personal ambitions were unfolding. Railroad traffic was increasing throughout the Colorado territories, bringing new economic opportunities but also new challenges for communities that had developed around smaller, more manageable operations. The expansion meant more freight, more passengers, and inevitably more attractive targets for the criminal organizations that preyed on transportation networks. Among the dispatches was a routine maintenance schedule that would require Kate to accompany Bill Harrison on an inspection run to Pine Valley Station, one of the most remote and challenging destinations on their route. The assignment represented exactly the kind of opportunity Kate had been hoping for, a chance to demonstrate her capabilities in demanding conditions while gaining practical experience with the mountain passes that would feature prominently in her certification test. Pine Valley Station sat at the end of a spur line that served the highest altitude mining operations in their territory, connected to the main line by 15 miles of track that included some of the steepest grades and sharpest curves in the entire Colorado Mountain Railway system. The route demanded exceptional skill from engineers and crews, with margin for error measured in inches rather than feet and consequences for mistakes that could range from costly delays to catastrophic derailment. Bill Harrison approached Kate's table as she finished her breakfast, his weathered face carrying the serious expression that marked important conversations. The veteran engineer had developed genuine respect for Kate's abilities during their months of working together, though he remained skeptical about whether any woman possessed the physical and emotional strength necessary for the ultimate responsibilities of locomotive engineering.
His agreement to mentor her reflected both professional duty and personal curiosity about whether his assumptions about gender limitations might prove incorrect. The inspection assignment to Pine Valley would require an overnight stay at the remote station, testing not only Kate's technical abilities, but also her capacity to function effectively in the isolated conditions that mountain railroading often demanded. The journey would take them through terrain where help was hours away if something went wrong, requiring complete self-reliance, and the kind of steady decision-making under pressure that separated competent railroad workers from truly exceptional ones. Kate accepted the assignment with the calm professionalism that had become her trademark, though inwardly she recognized the significance of the opportunity. Success would add valuable experience to her record and strengthen her case for certification consideration, while failure might provide ammunition for those who argued that women lacked the resilience necessary for railroad work. The stakes were higher than Bill Harrison realized, encompassing not just her personal ambitions but her entire future in the railroad industry. The preparation for the Pine Valley run revealed the meticulous attention to detail that Kate brought to every aspect of her work. She spent the morning reviewing maintenance schedules, checking weather forecasts and studying the topographical challenges they would encounter during the journey. Her approach combined the systematic thoroughness of her engineering training with the tactical awareness that her military background had ingrained, creating contingency plans for various scenarios that might arise during their trip. The locomotive assigned to their inspection run was one of the Colorado Mountain Railway's newer models, designed specifically for the demanding conditions of high-altitude operations. Kate had worked on similar engines countless times during her tenure as assistant mechanic, but this journey would give her the opportunity to observe its performance under actual operating conditions rather than in the controlled environment of the rail yard. The experience would prove invaluable when she faced similar equipment during her certification examination. Margaret O'Brien watched the preparations with the keen interest of someone who had seen dozens of railroad workers come and go during her years operating the boarding house. Maggie's Irish background had given her a healthy skepticism toward authority and conventional wisdom, making her one of Kate's more reliable supporters among the established members of Copper Ridge Society. The landlady's approval carried weight in the informal networks that shaped community opinion, particularly among the women who formed the social backbone of frontier towns. The boarding house had become an unofficial information center for railroad operations, with workers sharing news,
concerns and observations during their meals and evening gatherings. Kate had learned to listen carefully to these conversations, gleaning insights about railroad operations, community attitudes and potential challenges that might affect her advancement prospects. The informal intelligence network that emerged from these interactions proved far more valuable than official communications for understanding the true state of affairs throughout their territory. Ruth Chambers arrived at the boarding house during the lunch hour, seeking Kate for one of their regular discussions about the broader implications of women's advancement in traditionally male occupations. The school teacher's visits had become something of a routine, combining personal friendship with advocacy for women's rights that sometimes made Kate uncomfortable. Ruth's enthusiasm for Kate's pioneering role occasionally overlooked the practical challenges and personal costs involved in challenging established social conventions. The relationship between Kate and Ruth reflected the complex dynamics that surrounded women's changing roles in frontier society. Ruth approached the issue from an ideological perspective, viewing Kate's success as validation for broader theories about gender equality and social progress. Kate's approach was more pragmatic, focused on proving individual competence rather than making political statements. The tension between these perspectives occasionally created friction, though their shared commitment to expanding opportunities for women provided common ground. Ruth's visit coincided with news that had arrived via the Morning Telegraph about successful women's suffrage activities in the eastern states, information that she shared with barely contained excitement about the implications for Western territories. Kate listened politely while continuing her preparation for the Pine Valley trip, understanding that Ruth's political enthusiasm served important purposes even when it felt disconnected from the immediate practical challenges of railroad work. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chester Polk, the traditional railroad foreman whose opposition to Kate's advancement had remained consistent despite her proven competence. Polk's concerns about women in railroad work combined genuine safety worries with deeply held beliefs about appropriate gender roles, making him a formidable opponent who couldn't be dismissed as simply prejudiced. His years of experience gave weight to his objections, even when Kate privately believed they were based on outdated assumptions rather than actual evidence. Polk's presence in the boarding house dining room was unusual enough to signal important developments, and his request to speak privately with Kate suggested either serious concerns or significant opportunities. The foreman's attitude toward Kate had evolved from outright hostility to grudging acknowledgement of her technical competence, though he remained convinced that railroad engineering demanded physical and emotional characteristics that women inherently lacked. The private conversation took place on the boarding house's front porch, providing enough privacy for serious discussion while maintaining the social proprieties that governed interactions between unmarried men and women in frontier communities. Polk's message was both simple and troubling. Rumors were circulating about organized resistance to Kate's certification attempt, including suggestions that certain elements might take direct action to prevent her success. The nature of this resistance remained vague, but Polk's military background had taught him to recognize the difference between casual grumbling and serious threats. His decision to warn Kate reflected both professional responsibility and personal respect that had developed despite his philosophical opposition to her advancement. The conversation revealed the complex pressures that surrounded anyone attempting to challenge established social boundaries, particularly in communities where violence remained a readily available solution to perceived problems. Kate received Polk's warning with the same calm professionalism that marked all her interactions, though privately she began considering the tactical implications of organized opposition to her certification attempt. Her military experience had taught her that threats should be taken seriously regardless of their apparent source, and that preparation for various contingencies was always preferable to being caught unprepared by unexpected developments. The remainder of the afternoon was spent completing preparations for the Pine Valley inspection trip, though Kate's awareness of potential threats added new dimensions to her planning process. The remote location and overnight stay would create vulnerabilities that hostile forces might attempt to exploit, requiring careful consideration of defensive options that wouldn't interfere with the inspection mission's primary objectives. Bill Harrison appeared at the rail yard as evening approached, carrying his own gear for the overnight journey and displaying the methodical preparation habits that had kept him alive through 30 years of mountain railroading. The veteran engineer had heard rumors about potential resistance to Kate's advancement, though he viewed such concerns as secondary to the immediate challenges of safely completing their assigned mission. The locomotive designated for their journey had been thoroughly inspected and prepared according to the exacting standards that mountain operations demanded. Kate had supervised much of this preparation personally, applying her mechanical expertise to ensure that every system operated at peak efficiency for the challenging journey ahead. The attention to detail reflected both professional pride and practical awareness that mechanical failures in remote locations could have consequences ranging from inconvenience to disaster. The setting sun painted the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and purple as Kate and Bill made their final preparations for departure. The autumn evening carried the crisp promise of winter weather that would soon transform mountain railroading into an even more demanding profession, adding weather-related challenges to the already formidable obstacles that mountain engineers routinely faced. The inspection trip to Pine Valley Station would test every aspect of Kate's railroad knowledge and practical skills while providing valuable experience for her upcoming certification attempt. More importantly, it would demonstrate her ability to function effectively in the isolated, high-pressure environment that mountain railroading demanded, proving either that she possessed the qualities necessary for advancement or revealing limitations that might justify continued restrictions on her ambitions. As they prepared to begin their journey into the mountain darkness, Kate carried with her not only the technical knowledge and practical skills accumulated during 3 years of methodical preparation, but also the tactical awareness and strategic thinking that her hidden military background had provided. The combination would prove essential for challenges that neither she nor Bill Harrison could yet anticipate, threats that would test far more than her railroad competence before their journey was complete. The locomotive's headlight cut through the gathering darkness as they began their ascent into the treacherous mountain passes that connected Copper Ridge to the remote mining operations of Pine Valley. Behind them, the warm lights of town represented safety, support, and the community that Kate had worked so hard to join. Ahead lay unknown challenges that would determine not only her immediate future but the broader question of whether individual determination and competence could overcome organized resistance to social change. The first part of their journey proceeded smoothly through familiar territory, with Kate observing every aspect of locomotive operation while Bill maintained the steady concentration that mountain railroading demanded. The conversation between them focused on technical details and operational procedures, though both remained alert for signs of the mechanical problems or weather changes that could transform a routine inspection trip into a survival situation. The steady rhythm of wheels on track provided a comforting backdrop to their discussions about railroad operations, though Kate's trained awareness detected subtle variations in sound that suggested potential concerns requiring monitoring. Her ability to diagnose mechanical issues by sound alone had impressed even experienced workers during her time in Copper Ridge, though the source of this expertise remained carefully concealed beneath her cover story of general mechanical aptitude. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew thinner and the locomotive's performance characteristics changed in ways that demanded constant adjustment to maintain optimal operation. Kate absorbed these lessons with the focused attention of someone preparing for examination under similar conditions, understanding that practical experience gained during challenging journeys like this would prove invaluable when she faced certification testing in just a few weeks. The inspection assignment had provided exactly the kind of advanced learning opportunity that Kate needed to complete her preparation for engineering certification. The combination of challenging terrain, demanding operating conditions, and overnight travel would test every aspect of her railroad knowledge while providing practical experience that couldn't be gained through any other means. Success would strengthen her certification application significantly, while failure might provide ammunition for those who opposed her advancement. But as their locomotive continued its steady climb toward Pine Valley Station, neither Kate nor Bill Harrison suspected that their routine inspection mission would soon become something far more dangerous and significant than either had anticipated. The challenges ahead would test not only Kate's railroad competence but also skills and knowledge that she had hoped never to need again, forcing her to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed new identity and protecting the people and principles that had given her life meaning since arriving in Copper Ridge. The mountain darkness stretched ahead of them, concealing threats and opportunities that would determine whether Kate Sullivan would achieve her dream of becoming Colorado's first certified female locomotive engineer, or whether organized resistance would succeed in maintaining the gender barriers that had long defined railroad work. The next 24 hours would provide answers to questions that had been building for 3 years, testing every aspect of Kate's character, competence, and commitment to the new life she had built in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. The locomotive's steady progress through the ascending mountain passes carried them toward a confrontation that would define not only Kate's future but also the broader question of how far individuals could push against established social boundaries in a society still struggling to define its own identity. The inspection trip to Pine Valley Station had begun as a routine assignment designed to test Kate's technical competence, but it was rapidly becoming something far more significant, a trial by fire that would determine whether determination and skill could overcome organized opposition and social prejudice. As the lights of Copper Ridge faded behind them and the mountain wilderness enveloped their train, Kate Sullivan prepared to face challenges that would test every aspect of the person she had become and the person she had once been. The hidden skills and knowledge that had helped shape her military career were about to prove their value in a very different kind of conflict, one where the stakes encompassed not just personal ambition but the fundamental question of what was possible for women in the rapidly changing American frontier. The steady rhythm of the locomotive climbing through mountain darkness marked time toward revelations that would transform not only Kate's understanding of her own capabilities but also Copper Ridge's perception of what women could achieve when given the opportunity to prove themselves. The inspection trip to Pine Valley had become a journey toward destiny, carrying Kate toward confrontations that would test the very foundations of her carefully constructed new life. The whistle of their locomotive echoed through mountain valleys as they continued their ascent,
the sound carrying across miles of wilderness where dangers both natural and human waited in the darkness ahead. Kate Sullivan, former military demolitions expert turned railroad mechanic, rode toward her future with steady determination and the growing awareness that her past and present were about to collide in ways that would test everything she had learned about courage, competence, and the price of challenging established boundaries in a world still defining the limits of possibility. Jimmy Fletcher had noticed something unusual in the telegraph traffic during his evening shift at the Copper Ridge station, patterns in message routing and timing that suggested coordination between parties who normally had no reason to communicate. The young operator's enthusiasm for his work had led him to develop an almost intuitive understanding of the communication flows that connected their isolated mountain community to the broader network of railroad operations throughout Colorado. The suspicious telegrams weren't explicitly threatening, but their timing coincided too closely with Kate's inspection trip to be dismissed as coincidence. Jimmy's youth had not yet taught him the political wisdom of ignoring potentially dangerous information, so he took his concerns to Dr. Whitman during the physician's regular evening visit to check on the telegrapher's chronic headaches. Dr. Whitman listened to Jimmy's observations with the careful attention that his medical training had taught him to apply to all potentially significant symptoms, whether physical or otherwise. The doctor's own military experience had made him sensitive to the kinds of coordination patterns that might indicate organized hostile activity, and Jimmy's description triggered recognition of communication signatures that he had learned to identify during his battlefield service. The implications were troubling enough that Dr. Whitman felt compelled to take action despite the risks involved in revealing his own suspicions about Kate's background. The decision to warn her represented a careful calculation of competing priorities, maintaining operational security versus protecting someone he had come to respect and whose success he genuinely supported. The warning message was crafted to convey essential information without revealing either the source of Jimmy's suspicions or Dr. Whitman's own understanding of the tactical implications involved. The telegram was addressed to Pine Valley Station with instructions for immediate delivery upon Kate's arrival, though both men understood that telegraph communications offered no guarantee of security from hostile interception. Meanwhile, in a remote cabin 15 miles southeast of Copper Ridge, Iron Jack Donovan spread detailed maps of the Colorado Mountain Railway system across a rough wooden table while his lieutenants gathered around to receive their final instructions. The Blackwood Raiders had been planning this operation for months, waiting for exactly the right combination of valuable cargo, vulnerable target, and symbolic significance to justify the risks involved in attacking a railroad inspection train. Kate Sullivan's certification attempt provided the perfect opportunity to achieve multiple objectives with a single strike. The symbolic value of preventing the first woman from becoming a certified locomotive engineer would resonate throughout the territories, reinforcing traditional attitudes about gender roles while demonstrating the Raiders' power to influence social developments through direct action. More practically, the inspection train would be carrying the railroad's monthly payroll for Pine Valley Station, providing substantial financial rewards for successful completion of their mission. Iron Jack's military background had taught him the importance of thorough intelligence gathering and careful operational planning, qualities that had made the Blackwood Raiders one of the most successful outlaw organizations in the Colorado territories. Unlike the crude bandits who relied on overwhelming force and random violence, Donovan's group operated with the disciplined professionalism of a military unit, carefully selecting targets and methodically planning operations to maximize success while minimizing casualties. The attack on Kate's inspection train represented the culmination of months of preparation, including detailed reconnaissance of the Pine Valley route, infiltration of railroad personnel to gather scheduling information, and careful analysis of the tactical challenges involved in mountain railroad operations. Donovan had identified the optimal location for their ambush, a section of track where steep terrain would prevent escape while providing excellent defensive positions for his men. Samuel Morrison, Iron Jack's chief lieutenant and designated marksman, had spent weeks studying the approach routes to their chosen ambush site, identifying optimal firing positions and calculating ranges for the various scenarios they might encounter. His Confederate military service had included specialized training in railroad interdiction, making him uniquely qualified to plan operations against moving trains in mountainous terrain. Carlos Vega, the group's explosive specialist, had carefully surveyed the structural vulnerabilities of the railroad infrastructure near Pine Valley, identifying points where minimal charges could maximum disruption while creating the tactical conditions necessary for successful completion of their mission. His expertise with demolitions rivaled that of military engineers, though his willingness to risk civilian casualties distinguished his methods from those employed by regular Army units. Tom Wheeler's insider knowledge of railroad operations provided the raiders with detailed information about scheduling, security procedures, and the specific weaknesses that could be exploited during attacks on mountain trains. His years working for various railroad companies throughout Colorado had given him comprehensive understanding of both operational procedures and the personal characteristics of key personnel, including Kate Sullivan and Bill Harrison. The raiders' plan relied on precise timing and coordination, with each member assigned specific responsibilities designed to achieve their objectives while maintaining escape routes if the operation encountered unexpected resistance. Iron Jack's leadership emphasized disciplined execution over individual heroics, understanding that successful outlaw operations required the same systematic approach that had made him an effective cavalry officer during the war. As Kate and Bill Harrison continued their ascent toward Pine Valley Station, the locomotive's steady progress carried them closer to a confrontation that would test far more than railroad competence. The inspection trip that had begun as an opportunity to demonstrate technical expertise was rapidly becoming something far more dangerous and significant. A collision between Kate's hidden military background and organized opposition that threatened to expose secrets she had hoped to keep buried forever. The mountain darkness concealed movements and preparations that would soon transform a routine railroad operation into a battle for survival, identity, and the fundamental question of what was possible for women willing to challenge established social boundaries. Kate Sullivan's journey toward certification as Colorado's first female locomotive engineer was about to become a test of everything she had learned about courage, competence, and the price of pursuing impossible dreams. In a world still struggling to define the limits of individual achievement, the locomotive's headlight continued to cut through mountain darkness as they climbed toward Pine Valley Station, carrying Kate toward revelations that would force her to choose between the safety of her carefully constructed new identity and the responsibilities that came with possessing skills that others desperately needed. The inspection trip had become a journey toward destiny, testing not only her railroad knowledge but also her willingness to use abilities that she had hoped never to need again, in service of principles and people that had given her life meaning since arriving in Copper Ridge 3 years earlier. The first rays of dawn broke over the mountain peaks as Kate and Bill Harrison guided their locomotive through the final approach to Pine Valley Station, the inspection run having proceeded without incident through the challenging night hours. The high-altitude air carried the crystalline clarity that came with autumn mornings in the Rockies, though Kate's trained eye noticed weather patterns forming to the west that suggested changing conditions might complicate their return journey to Copper Ridge. Pine Valley Station perched on a narrow shelf of land carved from the mountainside, its collection of weathered buildings dwarfed by the towering peaks that surrounded the remote outpost. The station served the highest altitude mining operations in their territory, connected to civilization by the precarious 15-mile spur line that had tested every aspect of Kate's railroad knowledge during their overnight journey. The isolation was complete and absolute, with the nearest help hours away through terrain that could become impassable without warning. The station master, a grizzled veteran named Thomas Garrett who had spent 20 years maintaining operations in this forbidding location, emerged from the main building to greet their arrival with the careful efficiency that marked all successful mountain railroad personnel. Garrett's weathered face reflected decades of experience with the harsh realities of high-altitude railroading, though his keen eyes showed immediate interest in Kate's presence as the first woman to reach Pine Valley in an operational capacity. Bill Harrison supervised the locomotive's positioning at the station platform while Kate conducted her assigned inspection of the maintenance facilities, her systematic approach revealing the meticulous attention to detail that had impressed supervisors throughout her tenure with the Colorado Mountain Railway. The inspection process demanded comprehensive evaluation of everything from track conditions to water supplies, testing her knowledge of railroad operations while providing valuable experience with remote station management. The telegraph office at Pine Valley Station maintained communication with the outside world through a single line that followed the railroad back toward Copper Ridge, though mountain weather frequently disrupted service for hours or days at a time. Kate found Jimmy Fletcher's warning message waiting for her arrival, its carefully worded contents immediately triggering recognition of potential tactical threats despite the young operator's efforts to avoid explicit language that might compromise security. The message itself was cryptic enough to avoid raising suspicions among casual observers, but Kate's military background enabled her to decode the essential warning about coordinated hostile activity targeting her inspection mission. The information was incomplete and unverified, yet serious enough to warrant immediate tactical assessment of their current situation and available defensive options. Station Master Garrett proved surprisingly knowledgeable about local security concerns when Kate approached him for information about recent unusual activity in the area. His years of isolation had taught him to pay careful attention to any changes in established patterns, making him an excellent source of intelligence about potential threats that might not be apparent to casual observers. Garrett reported several incidents during the previous weeks that individually seemed insignificant but collectively suggested systematic surveillance of Pine Valley operations. Strange riders had been observed in areas where they had no legitimate business. Telegraph communications had experienced unexplained interruptions, and supply deliveries had encountered minor delays that could indicate interference with normal transportation schedules. The pattern of suspicious activity described by Garrett matched reconnaissance procedures that Kate recognized from her military experience, suggesting organized preparation for hostile action rather than random criminal opportunism. The implications were troubling enough that she began considering defensive measures while maintaining the appearance of routine inspection activities that wouldn't alert potential observers to her awareness of their surveillance. Bill Harrison noticed Kate's increased alertness during their morning discussions about locomotive maintenance procedures, though he attributed her behavior to the natural tension that accompanied important inspection assignments rather than any specific security concerns. The veteran engineer's 3 decades of mountain railroading had taught him to focus on immediate technical challenges rather than hypothetical threats that might distract from essential operational responsibilities. The inspection schedule called for comprehensive evaluation of all station facilities during their daylight hours at Pine Valley, followed by overnight rest before beginning their return journey to Copper Ridge the following morning. Kate recognized that the timing created significant tactical vulnerabilities, particularly if hostile forces had advanced knowledge of their itinerary and sufficient time to position themselves for optimal attack opportunities. The locomotive that had carried them safely through the challenging mountain ascent now required detailed maintenance attention before attempting the equally demanding return journey. Kate supervised this work with particular care, understanding that mechanical failures during their descent could prove catastrophic given the steep grades and sharp curves that characterize the Pine Valley route. Her inspection of the locomotive's braking system revealed wear patterns that suggested more intensive use than normal maintenance schedules would indicate, though the evidence was subtle enough that less experienced observers might have missed its significance. The discovery raised questions about whether their locomotive had been subjected to unauthorized operation or tampering that could compromise its reliability during critical phases of their return journey. Thomas Garrett proved unexpectedly forthcoming about local political tensions when Kate inquired about community attitudes toward women in railroad work. The isolation of Pine Valley had created a social environment where competence mattered more than conventional gender roles, though Garrett warned that outside influences had been attempting to stir opposition to Kate's certification efforts among the mining crews. The political dimensions of Kate's advancement had apparently reached even this remote outpost, with various factions attempting to use her success or failure as validation for
competing philosophies about social change in the territories. Garrett expressed frustration with outside interference in local affairs, preferring to judge individuals based on their actual performance rather than abstract ideological positions. The mining operations that Pine Valley Station served employed several hundred workers in the treacherous business of extracting valuable ores from the high-altitude deposits that made the dangerous rail connection economically viable. These miners represented a diverse collection of backgrounds and nationalities, united primarily by their willingness to accept the risks and isolation that mountain mining demanded in exchange for wages that exceeded those available in more accessible locations. Kate's interactions with various mining personnel throughout the day revealed generally positive attitudes toward her railroad ambitions, though several workers mentioned pressure from outside agitators attempting to organize opposition to women's advancement in traditionally male occupations. The resistance appeared to be externally organized rather than reflecting genuine local sentiment, suggesting coordinated efforts to influence public opinion about gender roles in frontier industries. The afternoon inspection activities proceeded smoothly despite Kate's growing awareness of potential security threats, her systematic evaluation of station facilities revealing no significant problems that might compromise future operations. The work provided valuable experience with remote station management while demonstrating her competence to Thomas Garrett, whose opinion carried weight throughout the mountain railroad community. As evening approached, Kate found herself facing the tactical challenge of maintaining security during their overnight stay at the isolated station. The warnings from Jimmy Fletcher and her own observations of suspicious activity suggested that hostile forces might attempt to exploit the vulnerability created by their scheduled rest period before beginning the return journey to Copper Ridge. The station's defensive characteristics were limited by its original design as a commercial facility rather than a military installation, though Kate's trained eye identified several features that could be adapted for defensive purposes if circumstances required such measures. The positioning of buildings and natural terrain features provided some advantages for defenders, though the overall tactical situation remained unfavorable given their isolation and limited resources. Bill Harrison accepted Kate's suggestions for enhanced security measures during their overnight stay, attributing her caution to the heightened awareness that any competent railroad worker should maintain in remote locations. His agreement to implement additional precautions reflected both professional respect for Kate's judgment and his own understanding of the dangers that could emerge in isolated mountain locations. The evening meal at Pine Valley Station was shared with Thomas Garrett and several mining supervisors who had remained at the facility overnight, providing Kate with additional opportunities to gather information about local conditions and potential security concerns. The conversation revealed general support for her railroad ambitions among the practical men who worked in these demanding mountain industries. The mining supervisors expressed particular interest in Kate's technical knowledge, recognizing expertise that exceeded what they typically encountered among railroad personnel. Her ability to discuss complex mechanical systems and operational procedures impressed men whose own survival depended on understanding sophisticated industrial equipment under challenging conditions. As darkness settled over Pine Valley Station, Kate positioned herself where she could maintain surveillance of the approaches while appearing to engage in routine evening activities. Her military training enabled her to conduct systematic observation without attracting attention to her security concerns, balancing operational awareness with the need to avoid alarming her civilian companions. The mountain night brought the profound silence that characterized high-altitude locations, broken only by the settling sounds of cooling metal and the distant calls of nocturnal wildlife. Kate's enhanced hearing, trained through years of military service in environments where survival depended on detecting approaching threats, picked up subtle variations in the natural sound patterns that suggested possible human movement in the surrounding terrain. The tactical situation at Pine Valley Station presented both advantages and disadvantages for potential defensive action. The elevation provided excellent observation capabilities in all directions, while the surrounding terrain offered natural barriers that could channel attacking forces into predictable approach routes. However, the isolation meant that reinforcements were impossible and supplies were limited to whatever resources they could improvise from available materials. Kate's assessment of available defensive resources revealed a reasonable selection of tools and materials that could be adapted for security purposes if circumstances required such measures. The station's maintenance facilities contained various implements that could serve defensive functions, while the locomotive itself represented a powerful mobile asset if they needed to attempt escape under hostile conditions. The challenge of maintaining operational security while preparing for possible confrontation required careful balance between readiness and discretion. Kate understood that excessive defensive preparations might provoke exactly the kind of hostile action they were intended to prevent, while inadequate precautions could leave them vulnerable to attacks that proper planning might have deterred. Thomas Garrett's experience with mountain weather patterns proved valuable for understanding the tactical implications of changing atmospheric conditions. The weather system that Kate had observed forming to the west was developing more rapidly than normal seasonal patterns would suggest, potentially creating conditions that could either favor or complicate hostile operations depending on timing and specific characteristics. The overnight period at Pine Valley Station passed without incident despite Kate's heightened vigilance, though her trained awareness detected several anomalies in the normal patterns of sound and movement that suggested possible surveillance activity in the surrounding area. The evidence was inconclusive but sufficiently concerning to justify continued security precautions during their preparation for the return journey. Morning arrived with the dramatic sunrise effects that made high-altitude locations spectacular despite their isolation and dangers. Kate conducted a final comprehensive inspection of their locomotive while maintaining awareness of potential threats. Her systematic approach to mechanical evaluation enhanced by tactical considerations that most railroad workers would never need to contemplate. The locomotive's performance characteristics had remained stable throughout their stay at Pine Valley Station, though Kate's detailed examination revealed several minor anomalies that suggested possible tampering or unauthorized access during the night hours. The evidence was subtle enough that definitive conclusions were impossible, yet significant enough to warrant enhanced caution during their return journey through the challenging mountain terrain. Bill Harrison completed his own inspection procedures with the methodical thoroughness that had kept him alive through 30 years of dangerous mountain railroading, his experienced eye detecting no obvious problems that might compromise their safe return to Copper Ridge. The veteran engineer's confidence in their locomotive's condition provided reassurance, though Kate's military training made her reluctant to dismiss potential security concerns based solely on mechanical assessment. The departure preparations at Pine Valley Station proceeded according to established procedures despite Kate's awareness of possible hostile surveillance, her professional demeanor masking tactical considerations that would have seemed paranoid to civilian observers. The challenge of maintaining operational security while conducting routine railroad activities required constant balance between readiness and normalcy. Thomas Garrett's farewell included subtle warnings about increased outlaw activity throughout the mountain territories, information that confirmed Kate's suspicions about organized threats targeting railroad operations in general and her certification efforts in particular. The station master's concerns reflected genuine worry about escalating violence rather than casual gossip about distant criminal activity. The locomotive's departure from Pine Valley Station marked the beginning of their most vulnerable phase, as the return journey would carry them through terrain ideal for hostile action while they were constrained by the demands of safely operating heavy equipment on challenging mountain tracks. Kate understood that the next several hours would determine whether the inspection mission concluded successfully or became something far more dangerous and significant. The morning mist clung to the mountain valleys as their locomotive began its careful descent from Pine Valley Station, the challenging route ahead demanding complete attention to railroad operations while Kate maintained awareness of potential tactical threats. The inspection assignment that had provided valuable professional experience was rapidly becoming something far more complex, testing not only her railroad competence but also skills and knowledge that she had hoped never to need again. The locomotive's steady progress through the descending mountain passes carried them toward confrontations that would force Kate to choose between maintaining her carefully constructed civilian identity and utilizing capabilities that others desperately needed for survival. The return journey from Pine Valley had become a test of everything she had learned about courage, competence, and the responsibilities that came with possessing skills that could mean the difference between life and death in hostile situations. The mountain wilderness stretched ahead of them, concealing threats and challenges that would soon transform a routine railroad operation into something far more dangerous and significant. Kate Sullivan's journey towards certification as Colorado's first female locomotive engineer was about to become a trial by fire that would test every aspect of her character, abilities, and commitment to the principles and people that had given her life meaning since arriving in Copper Ridge 3 years earlier. The Thunder Canyon Railway Bridge loomed ahead through the morning mist, its engineering marvel spanning a gorge that dropped away into darkness below the elevated tracks. Kate had studied this bridge extensively during her preparation for certification, understanding that it represented one of the most challenging sections of their return route, and potentially the most tactically significant location where hostile forces might choose to make their presence known. The bridge's design incorporated the latest advances in railroad engineering, utilizing steel framework and innovative construction techniques to safely carry heavy locomotives across the seemingly impossible gap between mountain peaks. Kate's appreciation for the technical achievement was tempered by recognition of the tactical vulnerabilities that the bridge created, particularly for trains that might be forced to cross under hostile conditions. Bill Harrison's approach to the bridge reflected the caution that 3 decades of mountain railroading had taught him to apply to all potentially dangerous situations. The veteran engineer's methodical reduction of speed and careful observation of track conditions demonstrated the professional competence that had earned him respect throughout the Colorado Mountain Railway system. As their locomotive moved onto the bridge's elevated structure, Kate found herself simultaneously admiring the engineering achievement and calculating defensive positions that might be available if circumstances required tactical action. The bridge's height provided commanding views of the surrounding terrain while creating obvious vulnerabilities for anyone caught in the open during hostile activity. The crossing proceeded smoothly despite Kate's tactical concerns, their locomotive maintaining steady progress across the span while she conducted careful observation of the surrounding area for signs of potential threats. The morning mist limited visibility but also provided concealment that could work either for or against hostile forces depending on their positioning and intentions. The successful bridge crossing represented completion of the most technically challenging section of their return journey, though Kate understood that the tactical implications of their route meant that danger could emerge at any point during their descent toward Copper Ridge. The inspection mission that had begun as professional development was becoming something far more significant and potentially dangerous than either she or Bill Harrison had anticipated when they departed on what seemed like a routine assignment. The ambush erupted without warning as their locomotive rounded a sharp curve 3 miles below Thunder Canyon Bridge, the crack of rifle fire shattering the mountain morning silence like breaking glass. Kate's military instincts engaged instantly, her body dropping into defensive position even as her mind processed the tactical situation with the cold clarity that had kept her alive through countless Civil War engagements. Bill Harrison cursed and reached for the brake controls, but Kate's hand intercepted his movement with surprising strength. "Don't stop," she commanded, her voice carrying an authority that the veteran engineer had never heard from the quiet assistant mechanic he thought he knew. "They want us stationary. Keep moving but reduce speed gradually." Her transformation was instantaneous and complete, the deferential railroad worker vanishing as someone far more dangerous took control of the situation. The attacking force had positioned themselves with professional competence along both sides of the narrow mountain pass, their crossfire designed to trap any train attempting to navigate the confined space between towering rock walls. Kate's tactical assessment revealed approximately 12 shooters utilizing military-style positioning and disciplined fire control, indicating organized opposition rather than opportunistic bandits seeking easy targets. Bill Harrison stared at Kate with growing amazement as she moved through the locomotive cab with fluid efficiency, checking sight lines and calculating angles of return fire while maintaining perfect awareness of their mechanical situation. "Who are you?" he asked, though the continuing rifle fire made extended conversation impossible. "Someone who knows how to fight," Kate replied, her attention focused on the approaching section of track where the ambush would reach its climactic phase. The attackers had chosen their location with tactical sophistication, forcing the locomotive toward a point where the track curved sharply while climbing a steep grade, creating maximum vulnerability for their targets while providing optimal positions for sustained hostile fire. Iron Jack Donovan's voice echoed across the canyon as he called for their surrender,
his words carrying the confident authority of someone accustomed to having his demands obeyed. "Stop the train and step out with your hands visible," he commanded. "We have no quarrel with railroad workers following orders. Our business is with the woman who thinks she can change the natural order of things." Kate's response was delivered through action rather than words as she opened the locomotive's throttle to maximum power while simultaneously applying precise brake pressure to maintain control through the challenging curve ahead. The mechanical precision required to execute such a maneuver under combat conditions demonstrated expertise that went far beyond normal railroad training, revealing capabilities that even Bill Harrison's 3 decades of experience couldn't match. The locomotive's sudden acceleration caught the attacking force off guard, disrupting their carefully planned timing while creating new tactical challenges for shooters who had expected to engage a stationary or slowly moving target. Kate's understanding of both railroad operations and military tactics enabled her to exploit the ambush's fundamental weakness, its dependence on predictable victim behavior. Samuel Morrison, Iron Jack's designated marksman, adjusted his aim to compensate for the locomotive's unexpected speed increase, his Confederate military training enabling him to maintain accuracy despite the changing tactical situation. His rifle fire began bracketing the locomotive cab with increasing precision, forcing Kate and Bill to seek cover behind the engine's protective metalwork while maintaining control of their increasingly dangerous situation. Kate's return fire was methodical and effective, her shots placed with surgical precision to neutralize specific threats while conserving ammunition for the extended engagement she anticipated. Each round was calculated to maximum tactical advantage, demonstrating marksmanship skills that exceeded anything that civilian railroad work could have provided. Her shooting drew admiring curses from the attacking force as they realized they were facing someone with genuine military competence. Carlos Vega emerged from concealment with an explosive device designed to derail their locomotive at the point where the track crossed a wooden trestle bridge spanning a deep mountain gorge. The demolition charge represented the ambush's ultimate weapon, intended to stop the train permanently while creating spectacular destruction that would serve as a warning to other women who might consider challenging established gender roles. Kate's recognition of the explosive threat triggered memories and knowledge that she had hoped never to access again, her Civil War experience with similar devices enabling her to assess both the tactical situation and potential countermeasures within seconds. The placement of Vega's charge indicated sophisticated understanding of railroad engineering principles combined with military demolitions expertise. "Can you hit that man with the explosives?" Kate asked Bill Harrison, pointing toward Vega's position while maintaining suppressing fire against other attackers. The veteran engineer's hunting experience had given him reasonable marksmanship skills, though nothing approaching Kate's military-trained precision under combat conditions. "I can try," Bill replied, accepting the rifle that Kate thrust into his hands while she focused on the more complex challenge of preventing their locomotive from being destroyed by the carefully positioned explosive device. Her plan required split-second timing and absolute precision in both mechanical operation and tactical execution. The locomotive approached the critical section of track where Vega waited with his demolition charge, the wooden trestle bridge ahead representing either salvation or destruction depending on the success of Kate's desperate improvisation. Her hands moved across the locomotive's controls with practiced efficiency while her mind calculated the precise sequence of actions necessary to survive the next 30 seconds. Tom Wheeler's inside knowledge of railroad operations had enabled the Blackwood Raiders to predict every aspect of Kate's likely response to their ambush except for the military competence that transformed their carefully planned trap into a deadly tactical engagement. The former railroad employee watched in growing amazement as Kate demonstrated capabilities that no civilian mechanic should possess. The explosive device detonated prematurely as Kate's return fire found its mark, Carlos Vega's demolitions expertise proving insufficient protection against someone who understood both the tactical situation and the technical characteristics of his equipment. The premature explosion damaged the track but failed to achieve the complete destruction that the ambush plan required, leaving a damaged but potentially navigable cross-section of railroad infrastructure. Kate guided their locomotive through the damaged track section with mechanical precision that bordered on miraculous, her understanding of weight distribution and momentum enabling her to maintain control despite infrastructure damage that would have derailed most trains. The successful passage demonstrated railroad expertise enhanced by military engineering knowledge and battlefield experience with improvised solutions to desperate situations. Iron Jack Donovan realized his carefully planned ambush was dissolving into chaos as Kate's unexpected competence systematically neutralized each element of his tactical advantage. The outlaw leader's military background enabled him to recognize when an operation had failed beyond recovery, though his pride and political commitments made retreat a difficult choice to accept. Fall back to secondary positions, Donovan commanded his remaining men, his voice carrying the frustrated authority of someone watching victory transform into potential defeat. The Blackwood Raiders began withdrawing toward prepared defensive positions while maintaining harassing fire designed to cover their tactical retreat. Kate's pursuit of the withdrawing outlaws demonstrated the systematic thoroughness that had characterized her approach to every challenge since arriving in Copper Ridge 3 years earlier. Her military training enabled her to predict their likely escape routes, while her railroad knowledge provided understanding of terrain features that could be used to either facilitate or prevent their successful withdrawal. The engagement continued through 2 more miles of mountain railroad as Kate maintained pressure on the retreating outlaws while Bill Harrison struggled to comprehend the transformation of his quiet assistant mechanic into someone who fought with professional military competence. The veteran engineer's respect for Kate's abilities had grown enormously, though his understanding of her true background remained incomplete. The final confrontation occurred at Widow's Point, where the railroad track crossed an exposed ridge with no cover for hundreds of yards in either direction. Iron Jack Donovan had chosen the location for what he intended as his last stand, recognizing that further retreat would only delay inevitable defeat while providing Kate with additional tactical advantages. Kate approached the exposed section with careful tactical awareness, understanding that the open ground ahead represented maximum danger for anyone attempting to cross under hostile fire. Her military experience provided knowledge of techniques for traversing such terrain, though success would require precise timing and absolute commitment to aggressive action. "Stay here and cover me," Kate instructed Bill Harrison as she prepared to leave the locomotive's protective cover. The veteran engineer started to protest, but something in her manner made argument seem both futile and inappropriate. He accepted the responsibility of providing supporting fire while Kate advanced toward the final confrontation that would determine the outcome of their desperate situation. The advance across open ground toward Iron Jack's position required every tactical skill that Kate had learned during her military service, her movement combining speed with unpredictability while maintaining awareness of both immediate threats and broader strategic considerations. Her approach demonstrated professional military competence that impressed even her enemies. Iron Jack Donovan waited behind improvised cover at the far end of the exposed ridge, his rifle trained on the approach route while his mind grappled with the implications of facing someone whose abilities exceeded his own military experience. The outlaw leader had expected to confront a frightened woman seeking to escape an impossible situation, not a trained combatant advancing with deadly professional competence. The final exchange of gunfire lasted less than 30 seconds but determined the outcome of everything that had begun with Kate's impossible dream of becoming Colorado's first certified female locomotive engineer. Her military training provided decisive advantages in accuracy, tactical positioning, and the psychological factors that determined victory or defeat in individual combat situations. Iron Jack Donovan's defeat ended the Blackwood Raiders as an effective organization while simultaneously revealing Kate's true capabilities to anyone who might question her qualifications for advancement in railroad work. The outlaw leader's final words acknowledged both his tactical failure and grudging respect for an opponent whose abilities had exceeded his expectations. Bill Harrison's arrival at the scene of Kate's victory marked the beginning of her transition back toward the civilian identity she had maintained for 3 years in Copper Ridge. Though both understood that their relationship and her position within the railroad community had been permanently transformed, the veteran engineer's respect for her abilities was now informed by knowledge of capabilities that went far beyond railroad mechanics. The return journey to Copper Ridge proceeded without further incident, though the conversation between Kate and Bill focused on the implications of revelations that would inevitably spread throughout the mountain railroad community. Her demonstration of military competence had saved their lives while simultaneously exposing secrets she had hoped to keep buried forever. News of the ambush and its dramatic resolution reached Copper Ridge ahead of their locomotive's arrival, carried by telegraph messages from Pine Valley Station, where Thomas Garrett had observed the engagement through field glasses. The mountain railroad community's reaction to Kate's demonstrated capabilities would determine whether her certification prospects were enhanced or destroyed by the revelation of her true background. Henry Whitman waited at the rail yard as their locomotive returned from what had become far more than a routine inspection mission. His medical skills needed to treat the minor wounds that both Kate and Bill had sustained during their extended combat engagement. The physician's knowing look confirmed Kate's suspicion that her military background had been partially understood by at least one member of the Copper Ridge community. Jimmy Fletcher's excitement at the dramatic news provided a counterpoint to the more serious implications of Kate's revealed capabilities. The young telegraph operator, viewing her military competence as additional validation for his support of her engineering ambitions. His enthusiastic account of the engagement would spread throughout Copper Ridge within hours, ensuring that everyone understood the true nature of what had occurred during the inspection mission. Margaret O'Brien's reaction to Kate's return reflected the complex emotions that many community members would experience when learning about the hidden aspects of her background. The boarding house owner's Irish immigrant experience had taught her to appreciate both the necessity of reinventing oneself
and the courage required to defend what mattered most when peaceful solutions proved inadequate. Ruth Chambers arrived at the rail yard with barely contained excitement about the symbolic implications of Kate's victory over organized opposition to women's advancement in traditionally male occupations. The school teacher's immediate focus on the political dimensions of the engagement provided insight into how various factions would interpret the dramatic events for their own purposes. Frank Murphy's official response to the incident reflected his position as railroad superintendent, balancing genuine relief at Kate's survival with practical concerns about the publicity that would inevitably accompany news of the dramatic engagement. The railroad company's support for Kate's certification prospects might be enhanced or complicated by revelations about her true capabilities. Chester Polk's presence at the rail yard represented the most significant test of community reaction to Kate's revealed background, given his consistent opposition to women's advancement in railroad work. The traditional foreman's response to learning about her military competence would indicate whether practical demonstrations of capability could overcome ideological resistance to social change. The impromptu gathering at the rail yard evolved into an informal community meeting as news of the engagement spread throughout Copper Ridge, drawing residents who wanted to hear first-hand accounts of Kate's confrontation with the Blackwood Raiders. The crowd's composition reflected the diverse perspectives that would shape community reaction to the dramatic revelations about her true background. Kate's address to the assembled community was carefully crafted to acknowledge her military background while emphasizing her commitment to the civilian life she had built in Copper Ridge during the previous 3 years. Her words sought to balance honesty about her past with reassurance about her intentions and character as they had come to know her. The community's response to Kate's revelations exceeded her most optimistic expectations, with even traditional voices acknowledging that her demonstrated competence under extreme conditions validated her qualifications for engineering certification. The dramatic engagement had provided irrefutable proof of abilities that some had questioned based solely on gender-based assumptions. Bill Harrison's public endorsement of Kate's engineering qualifications carried enormous weight throughout the mountain railroad community, given his respected position and first-hand experience of her capabilities under the most challenging conditions possible. The veteran engineer's support transformed skepticism into acceptance among many who had previously questioned women's suitability for railroad work. The formal certification examination proceeded just 2 weeks later, with Kate demonstrating the same calm competence under evaluation conditions that she had shown during combat against the Blackwood Raiders. Her performance exceeded the standards required for certification while providing additional evidence of the systematic preparation and professional dedication that had characterized her approach to every challenge. The announcement of Kate's successful certification as Colorado's first female locomotive engineer was met with celebration throughout Copper Ridge and recognition from railroad communities across the Western Territories. Her achievement represented both personal triumph and broader validation of women's capabilities in demanding technical fields previously considered exclusively masculine domains. The new role that Kate assumed following her certification reflected the community's understanding that her unique combination of technical expertise and tactical competence made her particularly valuable for challenging assignments throughout the Colorado Mountain Railway system. Her position evolved beyond simple engineering duties to include security consultation and crisis response responsibilities. The Blackwood Raiders' defeat and subsequent dissolution had broader implications for railroad security throughout the Colorado Territories, with Kate's tactical innovations being studied and implemented by other railroad companies facing similar threats. Her military background had provided practical solutions to problems that conventional approaches had failed to address effectively. The boarding house evening gatherings took on new significance as Kate shared carefully selected insights about security awareness and tactical thinking with community members who faced various challenges in their frontier environment. Her teaching emphasized practical applications of strategic thinking rather than military techniques, focusing on problem-solving approaches that could benefit civilian activities. The relationship between Kate and Dr. Whitman deepened into friendship based on shared understanding of the challenges faced by military veterans adapting to civilian life in frontier communities. Their conversations provided both with valuable perspectives on the process of integrating combat experience with peaceful pursuits while maintaining readiness for situations that might require specialized skills. Jimmy Fletcher's continued enthusiasm for Kate's achievements reflected the generational changes that were transforming frontier society, with younger residents more willing to embrace social innovations that older community members viewed with skepticism. The telegraph operator's support provided Kate with valuable insights into communication networks that connected Copper Ridge to broader territorial developments. Ruth Chambers' documentation of Kate's achievements created a historical record that would inspire other women throughout the territories to pursue their own ambitions in traditionally male-dominated fields. The school teachers' efforts ensured that Kate's story became part of the broader narrative of women's expanding roles in American society during the rapidly changing frontier period. The Colorado Mountain Railway Company's official recognition of Kate's contributions included both her engineering certification and special commendation for her role in protecting company personnel and property during the Blackwood Raiders' engagement. The recognition established precedents for evaluating employees based on comprehensive capabilities rather than narrow job-specific skills alone. 6 months after her certification, Kate stood on the platform at Copper Ridge Station preparing to depart on her first solo engineering assignment, commanding a freight train bound for Denver with a cargo that included copper ore from Pine Valley Station. The journey would take her through the same mountain passes where she had faced the Blackwood Raiders, though now she traveled as the acknowledged master of both railroad operations and tactical security. The locomotive under Kate's command represented the culmination of her 3-year journey from anonymous assistant mechanic to certified engineer, its powerful engine responding to her expert control as they began their descent through the challenging mountain terrain. Her competence was no longer questioned by anyone who had witnessed her performance under both routine and crisis conditions. The mountain wilderness that had once concealed threats now served as the backdrop for Kate's regular operations, her intimate knowledge of terrain and tactical considerations providing advantages that enhanced both safety and efficiency for all railroad personnel working in challenging environments. Her success had transformed not only her own prospects but also the broader understanding of what was possible when individuals were judged by capability rather than preconceptions. The whistle of Kate's locomotive echoed across Copper Ridge as she guided her train toward new challenges and opportunities. carrying cargo that would support communities throughout Colorado while demonstrating daily that competence and determination could overcome even the most entrenched barriers to individual achievement. Her journey from hidden identity to public recognition had proven that sometimes the most unlikely people possessed exactly the skills that their communities needed most. The legacy of Kate Sullivan's transformation from Civil War veteran to railroad pioneer would inspire generations of women throughout the American frontier, proving that individual courage and competence could challenge established social boundaries while creating new possibilities for everyone willing to pursue seemingly impossible dreams. With systematic preparation and unwavering determination, the morning air carried an unusual tension as Kate made her final preparations for what would prove to be the most significant day of her 3 years in Copper Ridge. Word had traveled through the mountain railroad community overnight about strange movements in the wilderness surrounding Pine Valley, reports that made seasoned workers nervous and caused even the most experienced engineers to double-check their equipment with extra care. The inspection run that had seemed routine just 24 hours earlier now felt charged with possibilities that Kate's military instincts recognized as potentially dangerous. Bill Harrison arrived at the locomotive earlier than usual, his weathered face showing the kind of focused concentration that marked serious railroad men when they sensed trouble approaching. The veteran engineer had spent a restless night thinking about the various reports filtering in from remote stations. Pieces of information that individually seemed insignificant but collectively suggested coordinated activity that went beyond normal outlaw behavior. His 30 years of mountain railroading had taught him to trust the subtle warnings that preceded major disruptions to their isolated transportation network. Kate noticed immediately how Bill's demeanor had shifted from the cautious mentorship that had characterized their working relationship to something approaching equal partnership, as if recent events had convinced him that she possessed capabilities beyond what her official position suggested. The change was subtle but significant, reflecting a growing recognition that the quiet assistant mechanic might have resources and knowledge that could prove valuable if their inspection mission encountered unexpected challenges. The locomotive assigned to their Pine Valley run had been subjected to more thorough preparation than normal maintenance schedules required, with Kate supervising every aspect of the work while applying standards of thoroughness that impressed even experienced mechanics. Her attention to detail went beyond typical railroad procedures, encompassing considerations that suggested military-level awareness of potential equipment failures under hostile conditions. The extra preparation time proved well invested when their journey began encountering the first signs of organized opposition. Dr. Henry Whitman appeared at the rail yard just before their scheduled departure, carrying his medical bag and wearing the serious expression that marked important conversations about matters that couldn't be discussed openly in front of casual observers. The physician's presence at such an early hour suggested that he possessed information about potential threats that warranted medical preparation for casualties that routine inspection runs shouldn't produce. The doctor's brief conversation with Kate revealed his awareness of suspicious telegraph traffic patterns that suggested coordination between parties who normally had no reason to communicate with each other. His military background enabled him to recognize communication signatures that indicated organized hostile activity, information that he shared despite the risks involved in revealing his own knowledge of tactical intelligence procedures. Jimmy Fletcher arrived at the telegraph office earlier than his normal shift required, his youthful enthusiasm tempered by genuine concern about the patterns he had observed in overnight message traffic. The young operator's natural curiosity had led him to develop sophisticated understanding of normal communication flows, making him uniquely qualified to identify anomalies that might escape notice from less observant personnel. The warning message that Jimmy prepared for transmission to Pine Valley Station was carefully worded to convey essential information without revealing either his suspicions or the tactical implications that more experienced observers might derive from his observations. The telegram represented his contribution to protecting people he had come to care about, though his youth prevented him from fully understanding the dangers that his warning might help others avoid. Margaret O'Brien watched the morning preparations with the sharp attention that her Irish background had taught her to apply to situations where trouble seemed to be brewing beneath the surface calm.
The boarding house owner's experience with various forms of conflict had given her instincts for recognizing when ordinary activities concealed extraordinary tensions that might soon explode into violence. Maggie's farewell to Kate carried undertones of concern that reflected her growing understanding that the quiet woman who had become one of her most reliable tenants might be facing challenges that went far beyond normal railroad work. The landlady's blessing was delivered with the fervent sincerity of someone who sensed that the day ahead would test everything that Kate had learned about survival in dangerous situations. Ruth Chambers arrived at the rail yard as Kate and Bill completed their final preparations, the school teacher's presence representing the community support that had sustained Kate's ambitions despite consistent opposition from traditional elements within Copper Ridge society. Ruth's encouraging words reflected her understanding that Kate's success or failure would have implications extending far beyond individual achievement to encompass broader questions about women's capabilities in demanding occupations. The conversation between Kate and Ruth revealed the political dimensions that surrounded her certification attempt, with various factions throughout the territories viewing her success or failure as validation for competing philosophies about social change and gender roles in frontier society. The pressure of representing broader causes added complexity to challenges that would have been difficult enough as purely personal ambitions. Frank Murphy appeared for the departure with official paperwork that formalized Kate's inspection assignment while providing documentation that would support her certification application if the mission concluded successfully. The railroad superintendent's presence reflected company-level interest in her advancement prospects, though his serious demeanor suggested awareness that the assignment carried risks beyond normal operational challenges. The paperwork that Murphy provided included special authorizations that would give Kate expanded authority during emergency situations. Recognition that her demonstrated competence under pressure made her uniquely qualified to handle crisis situations that might overwhelm less experienced personnel. The expanded responsibilities represented both opportunity and burden, as success would advance her career while failure might compromise the entire railroad's operational security. Chester Polk's unexpected appearance at their departure represented the most surprising development of the morning, given his consistent opposition to Kate's advancement throughout her tenure with the Colorado Mountain Railway. The traditional foreman's presence suggested either significant changes in his attitude or awareness of threats serious enough to override his philosophical objections to women in railroad work. Polk's private conversation with Kate revealed information about organized resistance to her certification that went beyond casual prejudice to encompass coordinated efforts by outside agitators who viewed her success as a threat to established social order. The foreman's decision to share this intelligence reflected recognition that personal safety concerns outweighed ideological disagreements about appropriate gender roles. The intelligence that Polk provided included specific warnings about the Blackwood Raiders, an organized outlaw group that had been conducting reconnaissance activities throughout the mountain territories while planning operations that would combine criminal profit with political symbolism. The Raiders' leader was reportedly a former Confederate officer who viewed Kate's advancement as part of broader social changes that threatened traditional values worth defending through violence if necessary. Kate received Polk's warnings with the calm professionalism that had become her trademark response to all forms of adversity. Though privately she began considering tactical implications that her military background enabled her to understand far better than civilian railroad workers could appreciate. The information confirmed her suspicions that the inspection mission would involve challenges requiring capabilities that went beyond normal railroad operations. The locomotive's departure from Copper Ridge carried symbolic weight that extended far beyond routine inspection assignments, representing Kate's final approach toward the certification that had motivated her efforts throughout 3 years of systematic preparation. The journey would test every aspect of her railroad knowledge while potentially exposing her to dangers that could end both her professional ambitions and her carefully constructed civilian life. The initial phase of their journey proceeded according to established procedures despite the unusual tensions that surrounded their departure from Copper Ridge. Kate's systematic observation of terrain features and potential tactical challenges reflected awareness of security concerns that most railroad personnel would never need to consider. though she was careful to disguise her military-trained alertness as normal operational vigilance. Bill Harrison's commentary during the early portion of their ascent toward Pine Valley provided valuable insights into mountain railroad operations while revealing his growing respect for Kate's technical competence and professional dedication. The veteran engineer's willingness to share advanced knowledge reflected his evolving understanding that she possessed the intelligence and commitment necessary to benefit from information typically reserved for experienced personnel. The challenging mountain terrain that surrounded their route created natural advantages for potential hostile forces while simultaneously limiting options for trains that might encounter organized opposition during vulnerable phases of their journey. Kate's military experience enabled her to assess these tactical realities while maintaining focus on the immediate mechanical demands of locomotive operation through demanding topographical conditions. The weather patterns that developed during their morning ascent added meteorological complications to the existing challenges of mountain railroad operations, with cloud formations reducing visibility while creating atmospheric conditions that could either favor or complicate hostile activities depending on timing and tactical positioning. Kate's understanding of how weather affected both railroad operations and military activities provided dual perspectives on the implications of changing conditions. The successful completion of the most technically demanding sections of their route demonstrated Kate's mastery of locomotive operations under challenging conditions while building confidence for the certification examination that awaited her return to Copper Ridge. Each successfully navigated obstacles strengthened her case for advancement while proving her competence to Bill Harrison, whose endorsement would carry significant weight with railroad officials. The approach to Pine Valley Station revealed evidence of recent activity in areas where such presence was unusual, signs that Kate's military training enabled her to interpret as potential indicators of hostile surveillance or preparation for aggressive action. The evidence was inconclusive but sufficiently concerning to warrant increased vigilance during their scheduled overnight stay at the isolated facility. Thomas Garrett's greeting at Pine Valley Station carried undertones of relief that suggested he had been concerned about their safe arrival despite the routine nature of their scheduled inspection mission. The station master's anxiety reflected awareness of regional security concerns that had made even experienced railroad personnel nervous about operations in remote locations where help was hours away through dangerous terrain. The inspection activities at Pine Valley Station proceeded systematically despite Kate's growing awareness of potential threats in the surrounding wilderness, her professional competence enabling her to complete assigned tasks while maintaining tactical alertness for signs of hostile activity. The dual focus required careful balance between immediate responsibilities and broader security considerations that could affect their survival if circumstances deteriorated. The overnight period at Pine Valley Station passed without direct confrontation despite Kate's heightened vigilance and her growing certainty that hostile forces were positioning themselves for action during their return journey to Copper Ridge. The tension of waiting for threats to materialize tested her discipline while providing time to prepare for challenges that her military experience suggested were inevitable given the intelligence patterns that had emerged. The morning departure from Pine Valley Station marked the beginning of the most dangerous phase of their mission, as the return journey would carry them through terrain ideal for hostile action while they were constrained by the operational demands of safely controlling heavy locomotive equipment on challenging mountain tracks. Kate understood that the next several hours would determine whether she achieved her certification goals or faced consequences that could range from career destruction to loss of life. The initial descent from Pine Valley proceeded smoothly despite Kate's tactical awareness of potential ambush locations along their route. Her systematic observation of terrain features enabling her to identify both threats and opportunities that might prove crucial if their journey encountered organized opposition. The careful preparation and professional competence that had characterized her railroad career were about to face their ultimate test under conditions that would reveal capabilities she had hoped never to need again. The Thunder Canyon Railway Bridge appeared ahead through morning mist that reduced visibility while creating atmospheric conditions favoring concealed movement by potential hostile forces. Kate's appreciation for the engineering achievement represented by the bridge was tempered by recognition of its tactical significance as a choke point where trains could be vulnerable to well-positioned attackers with military-level planning and coordination. The successful bridge crossing demonstrated Kate's technical competence under challenging conditions while carrying them toward the section of track where intelligence reports suggested the highest probability of encountering organized resistance. Her preparation for potential combat while maintaining focus on railroad operations required integration of military and civilian skills that few individuals possessed, reflecting the unique combination of experiences that had shaped her character. The ambush erupted with professional timing and coordination as their locomotive entered the narrow canyon where the Blackwood Raiders had positioned themselves for maximum tactical advantage. Kate's instantaneous response revealed military training and combat experience that transformed her from railroad mechanic to battlefield commander within seconds. Her tactical competence proving decisive in a confrontation that would determine not only her survival but also her future prospects in the railroad industry. The defeat of Iron Jack Donovan and his outlaw organization represented more than personal victory for Kate, establishing her credentials as someone whose capabilities exceeded normal railroad requirements while demonstrating that women could succeed in the most demanding frontier occupations when given opportunities to prove their competence. Her achievement would inspire others throughout the territories to pursue their own seemingly impossible dreams with systematic preparation and unwavering determination. The return to Copper Ridge as a celebrated hero rather than anonymous assistant mechanic marked Kate's transformation from hidden identity to public recognition. Her revealed military background adding complexity to community understanding of her character while strengthening rather than undermining support for her railroad ambitions. The dramatic engagement had proven that sometimes the most valuable employees were those whose full capabilities remained concealed until circumstances demanded their revelation. The certification examination that followed within weeks represented a formality rather than a genuine test, given Kate's demonstrated competence under conditions far more demanding than normal evaluation procedures could provide. Her official recognition as Colorado's first certified female locomotive engineer validated years of systematic preparation while establishing precedents that would benefit other women seeking advancement in traditionally male-dominated industries. The legacy of Kate Sullivan's achievement extended far beyond individual success to encompass broader social progress and the expansion of opportunities for women throughout the rapidly changing American frontier. Her story demonstrated that determination, competence, and strategic thinking could overcome even the most entrenched resistance to social change when combined with the courage to pursue seemingly impossible goals despite overwhelming odds. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up, just click and check them out.